Carol and I conceived our love child months before our engagement. Carol's lease said no pets, but Carol said, I've got to have a Bichon Frise. Linda said we could have her last pup in the litter if we signed a prenup. Fellow Toastmasters, honored guest, meet Slugger. Carol would come over to my house on her lunch break just to give him extra hugs. He sped up our engagement, could have been our best man, and became our hero. I'd inserted this doggy door in our garage door so that he could come out on his leash and sit on his perch for hours. One morning, Carol was sleeping in because she'd worked second shift, and Slugger began barking loudly, non-stop. Carol looked out and saw on the side yard furthest from Slugger, fire. She quickly called 911 and went out with the garden hose. The house was saved. Our hero had just one issue: neutering. Linda had warned that doing this too soon might cause a personality change and hip dysplasia. Keeping him intact did cause his running loose on occasion. We would find him an hour or two later, his fur filled with dirt and brambles, and his paw raised, asking for forgiveness. One school morning, I saw his leash stretched through the doggy door, not attached to Slugger. With a sickened feeling and eyes wide open, I circled through the neighborhood before heading on to school. I didn't want my students running loose in the halls. I hoped that Carol could find him. We could end this now as a warning to spay and neuter, but there's an even higher calling to protect lives even more precious, like the women and children being bombed by a Russian dictator. To portray a vicious Russian dictator, Stalin, George Orwell used a boar, a male pig, in his allegorical Animal Farm. Slugger's no male pig, but there is Putin. Now's the time for a call for a new allegory and to act on its three-part message: a signed agreement, a raging fire, and reaching the end. To provide for Slugger, my wife and I had signed an agreement, a prenuptial, if you will, back in 1991, the same year as the Soviet breakup. In 1994, 3 countries wanted to provide for Ukraine's safety. Ukraine, as part of the Soviet bloc, had 1/3 of the whole world's nuclear arms. Russia was anxious to sign because it could then move most of those weapons to its soil. Great Britain and the US signed to limit the number of nuclear nations. Then 2014, 20 years later, dictator Putin annexes Crimea from Ukraine and starts a civil war, while the world mostly just watched. Our watchdog Slugger didn't just watch the neighbors start the grease fire in our side yard. He barked ferociously until Carol called 911 and came with a garden hose. That's like President Zelensky warning the West to equip his troops to put out the fire, warning the small neighboring nations that piggish Putin just may gobble them up. Where does this end? I was out that second morning on the way to school and saw Slugger off I-26. I came to see he was almost like asleep, so clean and white, just off the highway, no brambles, no blood, not like the roadkill of over 7,000 civilians, over 400 children left on the highway to Putin's vicious road to Russian glory that's mostly gory. You may remember the start of the war, the day that the Russian warship demanded that 13 Ukrainian border guards surrender. They refused. They were bombed into submission, released in a prisoner swap, honored on a stamp, and 2 days later, that warship was sunk. When her stock of those stamps ran out on eBay, Natalia sold me some badges. She wrote me that victory will be ours because we have no choice. If we do not win, we will all be killed. Last year, the Council on Foreign Affairs said that Congress approved nearly $50 billion in aid. That's nearly $200 for each American adult, for a cause that Russians on state media cannot really see, but dictators in Iran and China can. Natalia, we see you. In our democracy, most of us are standing with you as long as it takes.